And joining us right now, the one, the only, the lovely, the talented, the Brenden and the Nunes, the insider, Sacramento Kings for Sactown Sports. Good morning, Brenden.
Morning. How's it going, gentlemen?
Good. We were talking this morning. It has to be a part of your personality at this point that you have not one but two names that are probably fairly commonly mispronounced. And we talked about this. You're a Brenden, not a Brandon. You're a Nunes, not a Nunez. Which one gets more commonly mispronounced throughout your life?
I mean, I think just the fact that you hear your first name more, that one probably has to win out. But if we're talking percentage-wise of how often I hear it, I would probably say last name is almost always messed up. I think if people just, pay close enough attention with the first name, there's enough times that is guessed correctly, and more so last name would be, it's Nunes instead of Nunez because it's Portuguese and not Spanish. So if somebody has a Portuguese background, they are more likely to get it correct. So long-winded way of saying both, and I would say worse odds on the last name.
Okay, you don't have to say it if you don't want to, but do you have a middle name that also is tricky?
Yeah.
No, pretty basic. Anthony. That's the simplest one there.
Anthony.
Yeah, Anthony. Aaron.
Right.
Well, yeah, because Nunes doesn't have the Enye, which is not what you call it, above the second end. But people will still probably say Nunez. Last question, because I think people want to hear Kings. I don't know. Do you correct people? Or do you just go, whatever?
I do not correct people. I think I'm actually guilty of letting people just say it however they want for way too long, and then eventually getting hit with, well, why did you never tell me? And I'm like, I don't know. It's close enough. I've always thought if you just say something that starts with a B that, it's close enough to my name, looking in my direction, then you're probably talking to me.
So when you say, I can now say, what did Brenden Nunes, Chrissy Teigen, and Ariana Grande have in common? They have all three allowed the world to mispronounce their names. And recently, Chrissy Teigen said the pronunciation she grew up with is actually Teigen. Ariana Grande, same thing, said it's Ariana Grande. But they just didn't want to correct it, and now it's in the zeitgeist. So congratulations on being not just an insider, but also a pop star.
Sure, I'll take it. I didn't realize that was the qualification that I was overlooking that I had met. But I'm here.
Well, what we're going to see tonight is we're going to see Domantas Sabonis take on the Clippers. Here's a guy that all he's done this week is have a game-winning putback shot against the Heat, and then the first ever perfect triple-double in the history of the NBA. And I think the main national narrative was, how does this affect LeBron's legacy? I've never seen a guy get the least amount of press for the most amount of play. The best part is he doesn't care.
I agree. There's a game winner in here as well, and it's not as flashy as some game winners. I think obviously that's a trend in how Domas, however we're going to call him today, goes about his style of game. But that offensive rebound he had against Miami and the touch to be able to put it back with that push shot, that's not an easy shot in the slightest. Just casually having a 20 rebound game mixed in here, and he's got 7 double-doubles on the year, 3 triple-doubles in these 8 wins. You're seeing him. He seems like to be the one that is potentially having the biggest adjustment or changes to his game to optimize the new fit along DeMar DeRozan, shooting more threes this year, already have a handful of games with at least 3 or more attempts in here as well. So, just the classic doing whatever the team needs to win. And I think sometimes it's just the cliche. It's not as flashy and doesn't look as great on highlight reels when it comes down to it.
Brenden, another guy that's kind of doing whatever it takes to help the team win. He got a lot of attention, I think, for that post game was Keegan Murray. Coach Brown gave him a lot of love. He's been asked to cover any position, really, all the way down the line. He's rebounding better. He's got 4 double-doubles already. Continues to score at enough of effective rate. He's not getting the same kind of love either, but what do you think of what Keegan's role has been while all these other guys still have been able to flourish between Fox, Sabonis, and DeRozan?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for Keegan, and Mike Brown talked about this after their last win, is that he's just constantly asked to do new things, and it seems like he picks it up quickly and does it no questions asked. Offensive rebounding was really emphasized coming into the year. That was really the only staple that they added / altered out of their 5 offensive staples this year, was crashing the offensive glass. And we know that Domantas Sabonis, he's just the best rebounder in the league probably, and already was there. But Keegan's the only one, I don't know about you guys, where I've really felt that change, crashing from, looks like the corners are part of their crash zones, and he's got the size, he's got the length, and now I think developed even more strength to go along with it, where he can crash those boards, make an impact. So, making a difference there. And then there's going to be games where you put him on Anthony Edwards, and then the next game he's on LeBron James. Tonight, I heard you guys talking about Norman Powell earlier, the role that he's had for this Clippers team with all their injuries. James Harden, obviously still one of the best scorers in the league. And the reality of this Kings team is that Keegan is your best option for both of those guys. And so that's a credit to him, but also says how much they need him on this roster, and his willingness to accept whatever altered role and then find a way to succeed in it, I think obviously leads to pretty good signs about how he could continue to develop his game moving forward.
Brenden Nunes, Sacramento Kings insider, Sactown Sports, joining us. Brenden, I'm going to ask you the question that's kind of been on my mind all week. Obviously, Kings are on a nice little mini run here after stumbling out of the gate. And I look at DeMar DeRozan's performance, and he's been all but flawless, not just scoring, but really the catalyst to bringing this team from last to first right now in free throw percentage. He's actually playing better defense than a lot of us ever thought he could. He and De'Aaron Fox both just stealing balls like they're criminals. It's phenomenal. But I do wonder if when they start playing those better defenses, when they start playing a lot of those better teams, do you worry at all that the ball stickiness, for lack of a better term, with DeMar is going to take away from the classic Kings offense, this edition at least, where you're running it through Sabonis, the ball's moving around, there's tons of passes every game? Is that something you worry about biting them eventually, or am I overthinking it?
No, I think so. It's kind of basic, and some people will hate that this is where the NBA is at, but I even have the aspect of are they shooting enough threes to keep up with some of these teams? And I think part of the answer right now is that the threes just aren't going down at a great rate for the Kings. Yes, they are taking less, but they're also only making 32%, which would be 27th in the league. And I think we all know that they have more talent on this roster than somebody that I would expect to shoot 32% throughout the course of the whole season. So I think that would look a little bit better as those numbers even out over time, but it is somewhat the new reality of this team. Obviously, that's DeMar's bread and butter, is getting to that mid-range. De'Aaron is great at it. I think we're seeing Keegan take steps there. And so that's going to be somewhat of their new shot profile. But I also think they have enough guys where, if at some point DeMar is going to hit a couple of those throughout the game. I feel the same way for De'Aaron Fox. You're allowed, it's easier to survive a cold half from De'Aaron Fox when you got DeMar DeRozan sitting right there, and he could have a big stretch at any moment. When they played against that, I want to say it was the Raptors in Toronto, he scores all 8 of their overtime points and has a stretch of 3 possessions in a row where it feels like he's just doing whatever he wants, picking teams apart. So I do think that stylistically it's going to be a little bit slower. There are going to be some moments where it might be hard to keep up with a team that, Boston shoots 53s a game. Now, they're the extreme, but sometimes you're going to run into those nights, and that could make it hard to keep up. But I think that is the reality of what this team is dealing with here, and I would still expect those mid-ranges to be carefully picked enough that they're still going to go down at a good rate.
Brenden, on the shooting front, more surprising that the fact you just brought up that they're 27th in three-point shooting, or that they're first in free throw shooting?
The free throw shooting, I don't even know what to make of. All I know is I'm sure they are glad to not be asked about it the same way this year. And I almost feel guilty that, like, we were talking about it a bunch last year and now they're first. And I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. But there's a line somewhere in between expected, allowed, misses that are going to happen on free throws. Like the Heat just did what the Kings did plenty of times last year. Lost a very narrow game because they missed free throws down the stretch and throughout the course of action. So I think that they were closer to this team already when it came to free throw shooting than the outlier performance I would call last season where they were dead last. But I mean, adding DeMar DeRozan definitely makes a big difference here. De'Aaron's knocking them down. Domas knocking them down. So I would say the three-point shooting probably a little bit more surprising than the free throws, but that's just because I thought last year I couldn't even make sense of it, to be honest.
I know it's a broken record question, but I do want to revisit it every once in a while. Do you think Keon Ellis should be starting for Kevin Huerter?
I do not. I don't think there's really a wrong answer between the two, but I do think that Kevin Huerter makes a lot of sense. The thing that I always highlight, and I feel like Mike Brown will bring up on his own a lot, is the pace that Huerter provides. And I think the spacing, I mean, we just talked about how their shot profile has changed a lot. It's not like Keon is a bad three-point shooter. I think he's a 40% three-point shooter for most of his career, a lot of that being in Stockton and OK Sample, obviously, with him starting last year. But he doesn't have as quick of a trigger as Kevin Huerter. Now, I think some people could think that's a positive, but I think that Kevin does a better job flattening out the defense. In the open court, he sprints to those corners. Like, you watch the way that he runs around in half-court offense. He is nonstop sprinting through his actions like he's Steph Curry. Now, that might be one of the few similarities that he has to Steph Curry, but I think that offensively there is a lot of benefit that Kevin Huerter brings to this group. And I also kind of think there's an aspect of just how do you optimize each one of these players. Now, maybe could it be a better unit with Keon Ellis out there? Maybe, but then are Kevin Huerter's total minutes being harmed because he looks better next to these starters? And you really only have 8 guys that seem to play on a nightly basis. So it might also have to do with just how do we put each one of these individual guys in the best spot where we can get the most production out of them.
That's Brenden Nunes.
Mm-hmm.
Brenden Nunes.
Yeah.
Sacramento Kings insider. And read him both on SactownSports.com and also follow him on Twitter as well. Brenden, have fun at the match. Yeah. Have fun at the game tonight. We'll talk to you Monday, buddy, or next week. Thank you.
Sounds good, fellas. Appreciate it.
You short circuit there?
I don't know. Have fun at the match tonight. We'll take a break when we come back. All right, let's get into it. We'll preview it. Who's guarding who?